Imagine being only 15 years old, sitting in your bedroom late at night, the glow of a computer screen lighting your face, and within minutes you slip quietly past the digital defenses of NASA, one of the most secure government organizations in the world. No guns, no masks, no break-ins. Just a keyboard, curiosity, and intelligence beyond his age. What followed next was shocking. NASA was forced to shut down their operations for 21 days, costing them thousands of dollars, and the United States government launched a full-scale investigation, not knowing that the person responsible was a kid who had not even finished high school. This is the extraordinary and tragic true story of Jonathan James, the teenage hacker whose brilliance changed the future of cybersecurity, and whose life ended far too soon. Jonathan Joseph James was born on December 12, 1983, in South Florida, growing up in a world transforming rapidly through technology. His parents described him as extremely intelligent, curious, and naturally drawn toward computers. From a young age, he spent hours exploring programming, learning how digital systems worked, and figuring out how to push them beyond their limits. While many kids were playing video games, Jonathan was learning how the games themselves operated at a level far deeper than most adults understood. By the age of 13, he had already begun experimenting with networks, online systems, and small-scale exploits, discovering vulnerabilities almost instinctively. He was bright, bold, and unafraid to explore digital boundaries. This mixture of genius and recklessness would ultimately take him into the heart of some of the most secure systems in the country. Jonathan soon found himself fascinated by systems belonging to large organizations. In the late 1990s, cybersecurity was still in its early stages. Firewalls were weaker, encryption was limited, and entire government departments were transitioning into the digital age. Jonathan recognized holes where others saw stable structures. One such hole appeared in the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, a branch of the U.S. Department of Defense responsible for analyzing nuclear weapons threats and securing sensitive information. Jonathan infiltrated their system using a method known as a backdoor attack, installing a sniffer program that secretly recorded usernames and passwords. With these credentials, he gained deeper access, reading confidential emails and monitoring the agency's operations from the quiet safety of his computer at home. Authorities had no idea a 15-year-old boy was silently walking the halls of their digital fortress. His most shocking act came when he turned his attention to NASA, the United States Space Agency known for its advanced technology and strict security. Jonathan penetrated into NASA's secure computers at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. Once inside, he accessed a highly restricted area containing software that controlled critical life support systems for the International Space Station. This software was valued at over $1.6 million, and Jonathan downloaded its source code directly into his home computer. NASA engineers quickly realized that someone unauthorized was inside their network. They discovered suspicious activity, unexpected data transfers, and breaches they could not immediately contain. The suspicious digital footprints terrified them. They could not take risks with the ISS or any of their ongoing missions. As a result, NASA made an unprecedented decision, temporarily shutting down their systems for 21 days to investigate the intrusion and rebuild security from the ground up. This shutdown alone cost the agency an additional $41,000, not including the manpower spent hunting for the intruder. While NASA and the Department of Defense were scrambling for answers, federal investigators launched a full-scale operation, involving cybersecurity experts and law enforcement officials from across the country. They tracked IP logs, communication patterns, and digital signatures, slowly narrowing the investigation. The search eventually led them not to a foreign spy, not to a criminal organization, but to a teenager in South Florida whose computers were filled with downloaded NASA files. Jonathan was arrested in January 2000. Given his age, the case shocked the nation. Reporters described him as the first juvenile in the United States to be convicted of cybercrime involving a government agency. The media portrayed him as both a prodigy and a cautionary tale. For investigators, however, the story was far from over. Jonathan admitted he committed the intrusion out of curiosity, claiming he wanted to see how far he could go and insisted that he never intended to harm anyone. Despite his cooperation, Jonathan faced serious consequences. The court sentenced him to 6 months of house arrest, banned him from using computers recreationally, and required regular sessions with a probation officer. He also received a warning. If he violated the terms, he would be sent to a federal facility for juveniles. At first, Jonathan followed the rules, trying to rebuild his life. But the restrictions were severe. He was a teenager whose entire world had revolved around technology, and suddenly he had been cut off from it. His schooling suffered, his future became uncertain, and he struggled under the weight of constant surveillance. He once said that he never intended to be a criminal. He simply could not resist the intellectual challenge. The law, however, saw his actions very differently. To the authorities, he had compromised national security. Years later, in 2007, Jonathan's name resurfaced when several large companies experienced serious data breaches, including retail giant TJX. The Secret Service believed sophisticated hackers were behind the attacks. During the investigation, they searched Jonathan's home, assuming he might be involved. Although he was never charged in connection with these attacks, the suspicion devastated him. He believed he was being targeted because of his past, not because of any evidence. Jonathan felt trapped between the mistakes of his youth and a system that no longer trusted him. He wrote in his personal letter that no matter what he said, nobody would believe he had changed, and that he was tired of being treated as a criminal for something he did as a teenager. The pressure on him grew unbearable. On May 18, 2008, at the age of 24, Jonathan James took his own life. In his suicide note, he explained that he felt doomed by accusations he denied, and that he believed the justice system would never give him a fair chance. He wrote that he was not involved in any recent cybercrimes, and that ending his life was the only way to regain control. His death sent shockwaves through the cybersecurity community. Many experts described him as a brilliant mind lost too soon, a reminder of how society often fails to support gifted yet troubled individuals. Others reflected on how his case shaped modern cyber laws, especially how juveniles are handled in digital crimes. Jonathan's story became both a warning about the dangers of hacking and a tragedy about the cost of misunderstanding young talent. Jonathan James left behind a legacy that remains deeply complex. On one hand, he demonstrated how vulnerable major institutions were, and how easily a talented teenager could break through supposedly unbreakable walls. His actions forced NASA and the Department of Defense to strengthen their cybersecurity systems, improving digital defenses nationwide. On the other hand, his case highlighted harsh punitive measures, the psychological toll of long-term suspicion, and how young offenders are often pushed further into darkness rather than rehabilitated. Today, experts still discuss his story when teaching cybersecurity ethics, reminding future programmers that brilliance without guidance can become a destructive force. Jonathan's hacking changed the U.S. cyber landscape forever, but the tragedy of his life continues to echo through the digital world. The story of Jonathan James is a powerful lesson about talent, responsibility, and the dangers of a world that was not ready for the rise of young digital prodigies. He proved that intelligence alone is not enough. Without guidance, mentorship, and support, even the brightest minds can lose their way. His hacking exposed the vulnerabilities of some of the world's strongest institutions, but his death exposed the vulnerabilities within the justice system and society itself. The boy who once brought NASA to its knees became a symbol of both cyber genius and profound tragedy. His life reminds us that sometimes the people who understand the digital world the most deeply are the ones who feel the most misunderstood in the real one.